this.
אני גמורה, הוא זרק אותי.
איפה?
ההיא פיטרה.
איפה?
ודודה שלי מלכה אותי.
איפה?
מה איפה? בחיפה, מה עכשיו? שאלות. נו, מה אתה ידרום?
שלום, שלום וברוכים הבאים להכי ישראלי ברדיו ג'ודאיקה 90.2 FM. הרדיו הגדול ביקום, כבר הסכמנו, נכון?
לגמרי, אין על זה דיון.
אין על זה דיון.
המוזיקה באוזניים.
המוזיקה לא מתאימה לתקופה, אני חושבת.
ממש לא, כן. אבל אולי דווקא טוב, ככה, קצת
אוויר.
לנשום, להרים את המצב רוח.
נכון.
לצחוק.
נכון מאוד, ואנחנו כאן, אנחנו מקליטות היום, אנחנו תכף נעבור לאנגלית.
מה איתך? מה עם המשפחה שלך?
בסדר, יש לי הרגשה שהמשפחה שלי, הטילים נופלים ברמת גן, והמשפחה שלי עושה ככה, את יודעת, זה מצד לצד, זה קצת מזכיר לי את מלחמת המפרץ, גם כל פעם שתל אביב התפספסה זה נפל ברמת גן. אז כן, אנחנו לוקיישן.
בעזרת השם
אבל שכולם יהיו בטוחים.
שיהיו בטוחים בדיוק.
וגם נגיד שיחזרו כבר את החטופים הביתה.
אמן.
כן. ואנחנו, and now we're going to change phase. Because we're here in a special show with a special guest. And we're going to open up some things today that are probably on everyone's mind. So who do we have with us today? Mise. Who's this?
Welcome, Yohan.
Hello.
So, guys, we have Yohan Benizri here, lawyer, activist, and community leader. He's the founder of Kesher, a Brussels-based law firm specializing in crisis management and European law. Beyond his legal work, Yohan has held key roles in major Jewish organizations, correct, including president of the CCOJB and vice president of the European and World Jewish Congress. His deep commitment to justice and community makes him a truly inspiring voice.
Well, thank you very much.
Did you know?
No.
I didn't know about all of that, but I'll take it.
Yeah, and most people, when they finish their day, their 9 to 5, they go home, they watch Netflix. They don't take on extracurricular.
And not law and order, I guess.
No, not a law and order. Netflix is fine. It's just that it's after I do everything else, which means that I start a little bit later than most people watching Netflix. But ultimately it's just a question of getting interested, and I would feel bored if I didn't do all of the things that I do, and also I would do them probably in a weaker way. When you're committed only to your work, and I think you would know that, Sagit. If you were only committed to your work, you wouldn't do as good a job as you do, because when you're busy doing several other things,
you perform better.
Exactly.
You feel more energized
and engaged.
Exactly. I understand you.
So how did you begin delving into the Jewish community, becoming more involved, becoming an activist? What inspired you?
Okay. It's basically, my father and my mother were always very involved in the community. My father founded a community center called the CCOJB, and he built the synagogue and he built the community around it. So it was always very inspiring to me. And, I went to Jewish school. I also went to non-Jewish school. And then when I was done with my studies, I was asked by the Jewish school to represent them in the Federation of Jewish Organizations. And by that time, I already had some professional experience. And so I prepared the meeting, which was something very new for the community, apparently. And so I came prepared. And so they identified me as somebody who could potentially work for the community. And I integrated the board, and then one thing led to another, essentially.
And Kesher, it's a firm that was established already then, or it's something that came?
No, Kesher was founded only 2 years ago. I worked for a little bit more than 15 years in a big American law firm called Sidley Austin, and it was amazing. But during my pro bono work, I met with immensely interesting people, and they were kind enough to trust me with some of their most intense issues. And I found a lot of meaning in that type of work. And I decided to branch out and launch my own law firm at that point. And I'm grateful that I did, because, as you said, I was quite busy, and it's good to be able to be managing your own time at your own pace.
Okay.
Inshallah בקרוב אצלי.
Amen.
Is it okay that I cut right through the meat? Because there is a lot that's going on. And I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. We live in peculiar times, in the sense that the current state of anti-Semitism seems to be rising across the globe. And I was wondering, first of all, do you have any insight? Is it as bad as it's perceived to be here in Belgium? Do you see it come into play in politics, in different communities?
Well, the answer is yes. It's as bad as it's perceived, because the way that it is perceived is precisely the problem. If Jews do not feel safe, it means that there's a deep and significant issue. When Jews are being placarded on the streets with a target on their back saying, he or she is supporting genocide, or when there's a minister who says, whenever they talk about the Holocaust, it's probably just because of their German guilt, or when another minister would say, please let Germany not be on the wrong side of history twice. Those are ministers, and they didn't lose their job. So the way that it works in Belgium, but also across the continent, is that there's not only a rising anti-Semitism. In fact, I don't remember a time where it was not rising since the early 2000s. But it is also that Jews gradually and continuously become uneasy in their own country. They start not wearing their Star of David, they start not going to shul, or when they go, they are very careful not to put on the kippah, and so on. And that signals something that is deep and really unsettling. So yes, it's as bad as it is perceived.
It's something that really changed, or it was always like that, but more on quiet level, I would say.
I don't think it was always like that. When I was a kid, it was not like that at all. I mean, of course, anti-Semitism existed. It's been a plague for 3,000 years. I think we know where it's coming from, and we know it's not going away. But the levels, the way that the general population acted towards Jews, the way that they perceive Jews, it has changed dramatically. And some of the comments that they allow themselves to utter are extremely concerning. And I think that happens around, starting from the early 2000s.
And what do you think made the change?
A number of things. Probably it's a confluence of different trends. One is, I think, the perception of Israel and the association of Jews with Israel is certainly one trend. But of course, that wouldn't be sufficient. I mean, Israel was also seen as a nice country for many, many years.
Yeah.
So
we were in the Smart Country Coalition during COVID.
Well, not only that.
Smart Country Coalition.
So it's been a very long time coming. Early 2000, there was a turn on the sentiment towards Israel, for sure. There are parts of the Muslim population, not all of the Muslim population, but clearly significant parts of the Muslim population in European countries, and particularly in Belgium, that is adamantly against Israel, but also culturally has a form of anti-Semitism built in. And that is something that we have seen in protests where they were calling for the murder of Jews, despite the fact that they were protesting for Palestine. This is a trend that we have seen over and over again. Then there is the opportunity of politicians knowing that they could win votes very easily at virtually no cost at all by demonizing the state of Israel, knowing full well that by doing so, they create the conditions for anti-Semitism to flourish. Again, it's not a problem to have a view on a geopolitical event far away. But if that view, when you say it, it leads automatically, systematically, to a rise in anti-Semitism in your country, I think you should probably pay attention to what you say. Okay. So that's another trend. And the last trend that I will mention is more of an intellectual trend. Late 60s, 70s, there was this movement of deconstruction of every power dynamics, and that started in the universities. And the universities have started to try to find a world of victims on the one hand and oppressors on the other. And we were put on the side of the oppressors somehow, despite the irony of this.
Yeah.
And that, I think, has led to all kinds of excesses, one of which being a rise in the sentiment that Jews were white supremacists somehow. And that was the vision that was associated with Israel as well. So, you know, colonial power, I mean, it's certainly not funny, but it's incredibly ironic the way that it happened. So all of the confluence of those trends have led to where we are today.
In American universities, at least in the past around 5 to 7 years, there has been an evolution in hatred towards Israel. We have Noah Tishby that has been going around for years by herself into campuses and seeing what's happening, seeing the roots deepening within the universities. Is it the same here to that extent? I mean, I know that there's also funding by...
Well, it's clearly worse.
Here it's worse.
Of course. In Europe, you have black spots. Like, for example, in Spain or in Belgium or in the Netherlands, but also in other countries, you have universities that are essentially single-minded about anti-Zionism. There's zero diversity that is even allowed. You couldn't say, well, I'm still with Israel because of this and this and that. This discourse is essentially outlawed in the university. And that's really what's concerning. It's that a beacon of conversation, universities, are being are turning towards tyranny. Tyranny being defined as Pascal defined it, which is a desire for domination outside of your own bubble. Like you want to dominate everything. And that's what is happening in universities. So in Belgium, the Association of Rectors of all Belgian universities is adamantly trying to cut ties with Israel. I mean, this is quite crazy, pushing the European Union to try and do that.
Despite the opportunity. Despite the opportunity of what you could actually achieve if you... Okay.
Forget about the opportunity. There are specific contracts that are funded by the European Union on cancer research. sometimes pediatric cancer research. And this is a topic that I am quite interested in, that is being disrupted because one university says, of course there's no problem with studying cancer, but we cannot work with a university in Israel because, well, the researcher has the title of the university in its title, and that university is in Israel, and Israel is guilty of something, and because of this guilt by association, cancer research can go to hell.
Really frustrating, and we are talking about the universities, but we have the feeling that Belgium is really, really in a bad situation comparing also to other countries in Europe.
That's something that I hear a lot, and I see why. I mean, the situation is very dire. We have still friends, including in the majority government that we have, but all in all, the situation is very concerning because of the movements that we are seeing right now. A very basic stuff. Sunday, there were 100,000 people for Palestine. That's not a problem at all. The problem is when you compare 100,000 people in Belgium marching the streets of Belgium. Belgians do not march the streets for anything. And they march the streets for Palestine because it combines a number of drivers. Compare that to November 2023, when we organized one protest, against anti-Semitism in Belgium, when the situation was worse than it ever was. There were painfully 4,000 people.
Oh.
Yeah? It's a 25 times larger crowd for something that is 3,000 kilometers away than what is happening right now to Jews in Belgium.
And what is the role of the Jewish organizations in changing the narrative, in trying to position the community and the people in the way that they, in combating anti-Semitism?
Yeah, well, combating anti-Semitism is, of course, should not be the work of Jews, of course. Now, it just so happens that we have to do it. We have to denounce it, we have to define it, we have to interact with the political echelon, we have to work with courts, we have to sue people. All of that is borne by ourselves, while, by the way, we also should ensure paying for our own security to send our children to school.
Yes.
So, all of that falls on the Jews. And we take it on because obviously we have a very heightened sense of responsibility. But ultimately, the ones that are harmed by this are the countries in which we live that let anti-Semitism spread. I have no doubt, maybe I'm too optimistic, but I have no doubt that there will be Jews in 100 years. I'm not sure about Belgium.
Take a moment, take a deep breath.
Yeah. And
go ahead, ask your question.
Yes, and what kind of ways we have to fight this?
Well, there are a number of ways, and I think the federation, which is led by my successor, is really doing a fantastic job. He was the president of the bar before he took on this job, and I think he's really fighting every single fight. So he goes to the politician, he submits letters, he meets with them, he is pushing them to adopt definitions to really react to anti-Semitic events. He is on every ball. But, ultimately it's impossible for us to have all the tools in our heads. in our hands. We're a small minority, and there's a limit to what we can do. We won against Dieudonné. We won of course, with the case against the attacker to the Brussels Museum, the Jewish Museum in 2014. There's a number of things that we can do, and we can do well. We have a good legal framework for most of anti-Semitic incidents, but culturally there's a problem. Environmentally there's a problem. If we let people say, we're just going to count victims, and whoever has the most victims is the one that we should defend, even if they're subject to a terrorist organization, we're never going to go out of this problem. So I'm not pessimistic in the fight. I think we should fight all the time, and whatever we do, we should never lose hope. But at the same time, saying, what is the silver bullet? If it existed, it would have been found. I think what we need to do right now is work on our environment, work on checks and balances, work on, the democracy. What is it really? I mean, if a democracy is the will of the majority, we're doomed. Because the majority is clearly against.
The majority
us.
is marching in the streets.
Exactly. So it's very clear that we're doomed. But if democracy is more than this, it's about checks and balances. It's about changing whoever holds the power. It's about making sure that everybody has a voice, diversity of opinions. There's
equity.
A possible equity. Yeah, if we have a real engagement in the society at large, and this is what Jews have always done, by the way. They've always invested very strongly in democratic societies because we know how valuable it is for humanity as a whole and also for minorities, each and every one of them.
But it seems that the audience against us don't let the facts confuse them, and it did. The ambassador was here a while ago, and she said that Le Soir and other
she doesn't get airtime.
She doesn't get airtime. They don't want to talk to her, so it's really difficult because they have the power. They talk to the people. This is the media. This is what the people see, watch, listen. So it's easy also to manipulate them, and for us to convince them, to show them, to present them our side of the story.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying where somebody got very famous saying facts don't care about your opinions, but it's the opposite. Opinions don't care about facts. That's the reality where we're living in.
Hillary Clinton lost an election over that. Yeah,
not only her.
Not only her, but fact checking is also after something has been said.
Too little, too late.
Too late.
Yeah.
Even if you see what is happening in universities, truth-seeking institutions, you understand that it's not about facts. It's not about truth. It's not even about open inquiry. It is something about cultural sentiment, cultural feeling on a specific issue. Yeah. And what I would like to see is more people understanding this, because we need to talk about the interest of the society at large, not about the interest or the facts of Israel or the Jews or anything like that. We need to talk about the interest of our audience. If a university allows for a cultural majority to form and decide the policy of the university, it means that we are in a totalitarian democracy. It means that we have one viewpoint and that everything else depends on that viewpoint. Whereas if we so the risk for them, not for us, the risk for them is that they will see all of those issues pile up. Yeah, the next truth that collectively we decided on is that, well, finally, women shouldn't have all of those rights. And if that happens, and there's a cultural majority for it, which is not something that I would exclude, then you have a precedent with the first cultural majority that formed. And I think this people understand. They understand that it's in their interest to think through those issues and look at the precedent that we're illustrating and seeing how then that could affect them. Yeah. Ultimately what happened in the US, where the Supreme Court decided that, well, it was not that important to protect the right to an abortion. It's just a majority. Yeah. The majority of the people voted for a specific policy, and then the cultural sentiment changed around the issue. But of course, the Supreme Court is also a majority. So the majority of the Supreme Court decided that. This is a precedent that people understand. They understand that something can change like this. And when it changes, it's extremely dangerous for society at large. Not for Jews, not for any other minority, but for the fabric of society.
And that's where you need, that's where you need the balance of power for the states to come in and say, in my state, I will make that.
Decentralization is great. Yeah. That's one way to solve a problem, is you think about this and you say, do I need to have a policy for the entire country? Or can I let states decide so that at least in some states there's going to be a level of freedom that is acceptable? But it's the same thing at the university level. Yeah, if you have a cultural majority that forms in your Middle Eastern Studies department, yeah, and it's being funded by whoever, and there's an agenda there, fine, but don't let cancer research be affected by that. Don't let your technical studies be affected by that. Okay. And so what you see in the US, for example, more and more is policies of institutional neutrality, which basically means we're a university, we don't take a position on political issues. We will let you do whatever you want on political issues. You can protest, you can do whatever you want, but we are not going to disrupt our core missions, research and teaching, because of your political ideology. It would be crazy.
But this is United States.
Yes, and we don't have a culture like this in Europe, but I'll be working on it at some point.
And you talked about protest, okay, the right to protest, but there is a certain moment where a protest becomes actually creates fear for the side that's being protested against. And I believe there were instances here with, I think
also in the university.
Yeah, in the universities, where at one moment of time, if you are a Jewish student, you don't feel safe anymore.
It's way worse than this. The president, I remind you that the co-president of the Federation of Jewish Students in Belgium was physically assaulted.
Attacked, yeah.
So, of course, this is a huge issue, but maybe something that we will disagree on, and it's good if we disagree a little bit. I sincerely believe that protests should be as free as possible, and the expression should be as free as possible. I recovered from this. In the past I was like, no, we need limits to free speech, because free speech unlimited is not good for anybody. I changed my mind on this, and I now believe that free speech should be quasi-absolute, but there are still limits, not to free speech, but there is behavior that crosses a line. What is that line? One is harassment. We have a definition of harassment. Incitement to violence. We have this incitement, and of course violence.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think all of our efforts, and I understand that many people are very careful with this, and I disagree with a lot of my friends on this, but all of the efforts of some parts of the Jewish community to cancel this speaker or to prohibit this speaker from coming to university is ultimately going to harm us. Because if you have a majority of people who think that any Israeli, including Eli Barnavi, should not be able to come to the Free University of Brussels to speak about peace, ultimately you lose out. Yeah, even if you want to disrupt or to cancel a particular speaker that would speak on behalf of the pro-Palestinian group, I mean, it's not good. It's never good to police speech to that level.
But don't you think, and I understand what you are saying, that we have to let everyone express themselves, but don't you think that it's also invite behavior, inappropriate behavior? Because if you bring anyone and they can say anything, they can push people that might be already on the edge.
Yeah, but it's a slippery slope argument, what you just did. It's basically if you do that, it will lead to that. And I understand the argument. I used to share it very much. Today, I'm not so sure. I think it is much better to strengthen the harassment policies or the incitement to violence policies, where you define exactly where the limit is. But if you're telling somebody you cannot speak about this at all, what you're creating is a taboo that will create a group that will be very, very nervous about not being to express its opinions, and you will not see them coming, and then they will do something really, really big. So I think this is the risk.
Of course.
I'm on the edge of my seat. I'll tell you why. What in Belgium, is there such a thing as freedom of speech?
Today, we don't have freedom of speech in the same way that it exists in the US.
Okay.
In fact, there are many limits to speech in Belgium. But what I'm interested in, and maybe you'll see my point in a second, today, some of the people that have the least freedom of speech are people that would say Israel is right in doing, in countering the threat of Iran. Israel is right in defending its population, including through a very intense campaign in Gaza, or at least was right for about a year. You cannot have that discussion without your freedom of speech being curtailed by the cultural majority. The majority will tell you, how can you say that? It's like, it's as if you were defending a rapist. That's the sentiment right now.
Yeah.
So
The reason for my question is that when you start a protest, you can start it in a certain direction, but there is a majority there, and it can take the conversation in a certain way. And you see that there were protests here where all of a sudden it was pro-Hezbollah, Nasrallah, go ahead. And that, it didn't start like that. It escalated to that. Now, if this is all within an acceptable level, then you're actually kind of promoting violence.
I understand this, but I haven't said that any speech was all right. I think I'm leaning towards that, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that there's a difference between ex ante regulation, so what you do before something happens, and ex post, what you do to punish something that has happened. I'm leaning towards the ex post. Yeah. So I would much rather punish harshly somebody who has crossed the line than defining a theoretical limit to free speech.
We talked about the universities and the people in the streets. Politics, politicians. How do you see them now? And do you think that they are saying one thing and maybe behind seeing they think something else, but too scared to say that?
I don't care anymore.
Okay.
I used to say, we know that we have friends, sometimes they have to say something that, for this or that reason. At this point, it's a question of responsibility. you are responsible for the safety of the people that live in Belgium. There's a portion of that population that is at risk, physical risk. If whatever you say is creating more risk for them, you're irresponsible. And I don't care about any other justifications. Oh, but I'm all for human rights and international law. Fine. Nobody has said that it wasn't good to be for international law. But when your behavior and speech is only about something that happens very far away from where you are, while in your own country, under your responsibility, there's a surge in anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic acts and violence in a country that has seen murders based on anti-Semitism. I remind everybody that we have seen people murdered in Belgium because of anti-Semitic sentiment. That was, by the way, linked also to anti-Zionist sentiment. You are irresponsible. And so we still have people who have taken strong stance around those issues of anti-Semitism. But by and large, we have a problem in Belgium. And we have a very big portion of our politicians who are either irresponsible or incompetent. They can choose, but they cannot hide behind their duty, their moral duty.
The thing is, and I think I'm not the only one who think like that the problem is not only against Jewish, against our community, it's against their own culture, against their own society. It's like they are...
For some of the issues, yes. But, and I think the political echelon is very well aware of the dangers of certain currents. But they're still irresponsible even on those things. For example, they would fight for neutrality, in the public service. They will say, it's not good if everybody comes with their identity and tries to push it towards the general population. They will say that. But it is France who has issued a report on the Muslim Brotherhood in Belgium. Okay. France had to do this work because we are either incompetent or irresponsible. And I'm not saying this lightly. I know those people. I've worked with them. I think some of them are well-intentioned, but they don't realize the level of their responsibility in the spread of ideologies that threaten the fabric of society, not only for Jews, the very fabric of society.
Are we trying to fight it out, to try to fight out anti-Semitism to maintain a certain status quo so that it doesn't get worse? Or could we actually improve the situation from where you're at today, based on what you see and who you interact with? Is it a fight that's worth fighting, or should we be packing? Or,
Yeah.
It depends where you want to go. If it's
would real estate prices drop? So is it to maintain a certain status quo so that it doesn't get worse?
I'm hesitating in responding what I really believe, because it's rather a controversial statement. But well,
go for it.
Let's do it. As a Jew, I would not invest in real estate in Belgium anymore. Doesn't mean that I want to leave Belgium. I'm Belgian. I'm Belgian myself. I was born and raised here. I really like this country. But I think it is irresponsible for me to tie myself completely to this place. And I never had that thought before. This is a really serious, very worrisome thought that I had, that, well, not real estate. something that I can take with me.
Yeah.
So one, I think the level of uneasiness needs to be underlined. Now, going somewhere else, it's not possible for most people. Let's be honest. Everybody says, oh, should we leave? And people don't have the means for leaving. And it's incredible to even suggest that it could happen. But obviously, what they're saying is that the air is poisoned somehow, and I think this is a signal to people who want a vibrant Jewish community that has always contributed to their host societies in a way that is probably unparalleled in the world.
Yes.
That if they really meant it when they said Belgium without Jews is not Belgium, or Europe without Jews is not Europe, if they meant it, they're not acting upon it. Now, to answer your specific question about what are we doing? Are we trying to just hold the fort, or are we really trying to change the situation? I think as Jews, the only thing that we can do is hold the fort, because you're not changing the entire culture by fighting against anti-Semitism. But also as Jews in society, we can work on environmental issues, on the general culture around us, so that we improve society gradually to make it better for everyone. And I deeply believe that. So I think, until we are at nuclear Armageddon, at which point I would go into my garden and just look at the fireworks. Until then, I will fight. And I will fight against anti-Semitism as a Jew to hold the fort. And I will act and fight on culture to improve lives for everybody.
Recently, we had here elections. Are the organizations also work together, combine forces?
Do you mean the Jewish organizations?
Yes.
Well, to a large extent, yes. I mean, I know everybody says, 3 Jews, 4 synagogues, and so on.
Oh, that's
This
true. We don't say.
Know.
That's true. That is a thing. That was confirmed last week, by the way.
Yes. So to a large extent, that's still true of Jewish organizations as well. I think I've never met so many presidents than in Jewish circles. They're all presidents of something. I was one, so I can say. But ultimately, they're working very well together. You have all the JCs that I call them, AJC and WJC and EJC. We're all fighting the same fight. And where sometimes there's a little bit more credit to this organization, and sometimes there's a little bit more credit to that organization, and sometimes we disagree on strategy or engagement. But ultimately, nobody's promoting anti-Semitism. so we're fighting in the same direction with different voices, and it's fine. You and Ifat and I, we may disagree on how to achieve our goals, but we have a common front.
Yeah. And how is your collaboration with Israel, if there is any?
Okay, so you're launching me onto a topic that is risky for everybody. Look at this. The Jewish community has never been a second embassy of the State of Israel. We obviously have strong emotional, family, friendly connections to Israel, and we have a bond to Israel that is the safe haven for Jewish communities at risk. Today, in the current circumstances, it's difficult to see it as a haven, especially for people with young kids. They don't see themselves moving to Israel because of the level of uneasiness here while Israel is at war. So there's no real coordination. There's a bond. There's an emotional bond. So when Israel is attacked, we feel an emotional bond. We worry about our families. We worry about our friends. And I want to say this to everybody who listens. We need to pray for our friends, for our families. We need to pray that it ends well and quickly.
Yes.
And of course that our hostages are back, as you said in the beginning. So the level of emotional connection to Israel is super strong. But I wouldn't want anybody to equate Jews with Israelis. Israelis don't do it. So it's very important to underline this. It's not the same. We're not voting there. We're not citizens there, and we need to make a difference. That being said, Israel is sometimes launching initiatives that I strongly disagree with, but it's a sovereign country, and this sovereign country does whatever this sovereign country thinks is in their best interests.
Do you have any questions before I ask my closing questions, Sagit?
Maybe you can, you said something more personal to the people in Israel, and maybe you can say something also more personal to our Jewish community before we...
How do one of the initiatives, this is an initiative to try to bring the Jewish community, the Israeli community together. And bring also some Israeli listeners from the radius of Radio Judaica into Radio Judaica. How would you see the Jewish community and the Israeli communities collaborating more?
There's a number of ways to do that. One is to go to Sagit's concerts.
Exactly.
That I think is a good way to start.
Or do a podcast with her.
Saturday evening.
Yes. So that's basically not a joke. I mean, ultimately, you create a community by interacting and going to the same places and doing things together. For a while, and I know it's not popular to say it, but I still do it, so I will mention it. For a while, it's at the synagogue. You go to synagogue and you meet with your fellow Jews, and sometimes there are, Israeli community members going to synagogue as well, and you create a small circle of friends.
But I can't sing there.
We'll find your reformed way.
Okay.
A reformed way.
It's fine. We have a very nice sound system at the synagogue.
Okay.
It's for you. But synagogue is one. Cultural events is another. I think the Israeli community in Belgium should invest much more in the youth movements. The youth movements are a treasure in Belgium. They're unparalleled anywhere in the world. It's mind-blowing what we have been able to create here, and I'm so thankful that visionaries before me have set up those youth movements. They're amazing, and so I would definitely see that as the one place where everybody can join in. And I don't think that the Israeli Jewish community is as invested in the youth movements than the Jewish community of Belgium. That's one way of doing it. The message to the Jewish community is, we'll be fine. We need to fight. We need to keep strong. We need to stay focused on our community maintaining good relations with all of the members of the community, not infighting, not criticizing one another, but create a community that is resilient. First starts with solidarity. So charity, other forms of solidarity, coming together, youth movements, synagogue if you're into that, or cultural events like Sagit's concerts.
Yes. I would like to end on a positive note. I wanted to thank you for coming today. It's not an easy discussion to have. It's not an easy discussion to have at this particular moment in time.
Very interesting.
Yes, but super interesting, and also puts in perspective what could we do as individuals in a different light. What I took from you is don't try to necessarily push fact-checking and go that route. Try to improve the ecosystem around, be part of a larger change, and that would have a positive influence on the positioning of everyone.
That's absolutely right. I thank you for hosting me. I really appreciate it, especially since I'm no longer the president of anything. I'm very grateful that I was invited. And so thank you very much to you both. And I think what you're doing with this show is incredibly important. And the more you can encourage people to interact also with the Belgian Jewish community, I think the better we will all be.
Excellent.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה. Thank you for coming here today. תודה לכם המאזינים שלנו, שאתם כמובן מדברים אנגלית, מדברים עברית, או צרפתית, פלמית, אנחנו עפות עליכם. תודה רבה. אנחנו כאן ב-90.2, בהכי ישראלי.
שנהיה ביחד תמיד.
שנהיה ביחד, ויאללה, לזמנים טובים יותר.